Hello and welcome back to AI Ramblings with my co-host Neil McQuana, myself, Michael Parek, episode 32. Do we have a lot of things to talk about this week? Not just news, but just additional things as we're going into the end of 2025 and getting ready for next year. Things aren't slowing down in AI land and things adjacent to AI land. Everything that we know, what we like to do is changing, will change dramatically. It's so much fun, and it's just the beginning of the beginning. So thank you all for joining us at AI Ramblings. Without much ado, Neil, I'm going to kick off with the first two or three things we want to talk about from a news point of view that we want to react to, and then talk about our major topic of the week, which is a little different than most of our episodes. So that'll be, I'm looking forward to that. And then our favorite reads of the week and obsessions and burning questions and all of that. So thank you for joining us. Okay, here we go. Number one item in terms of the news of the week. OpenAI. They just celebrated the third birthday of ChatGPT last week. We talked about it. Well, this week they announced internally a code red. From the movie and military references. I had a big post about this in that context. Irony of ironies. ChatGPT was born on November 30, 2022. Literally the following month, December of 2022, Google internally announces a code red because the whole world was, oh my God, AI is coming. ChatGPT is going to come. It's going to kill Google search. OpenAI's partner at the time, Satya Nadella from Microsoft, goes on with The Verge and with Nilay Patel, the editor-in-chief, and says, we just want to make Google dance. Guess what? So Satya he started the thing with the Google dance thing. Sundar at Google, announces a code red in 2022, 3 years ago. And guess what? 3 years later, Google is now up almost 25%. Because they now have Google Gemini 3, which is clobbering ChatGPT 5.1 with its warmer tones and so on. And they have the TPUs, which are these big GPU things that are competing directly with NVIDIA. So they're going 1-2, as we talked about last week, against both OpenAI and NVIDIA, while being their partners and friends and all of that. So OpenAI announces a code red. I think it's just very interesting to kind of talk about. It's surprising that they did it. And by doing it, they're also saying we're going to de-emphasize this whole slate of applications that we want to do for AI, like assistance and the music stuff and the video stuff and all of these other features that they've been planning, including, I assume, AI browsers and their version of search, etc. I'm sure they're working on it, but they're de-emphasizing as they try to make their core GPT engine a lot more competitive with not just Gemini, by the way, from Google, but also Anthropic, their cousin over there, sibling, who's also coming on strong on the enterprise side, which is the other part of their core business. So for all those reasons, it's code red time at OpenAI. It's interesting to talk about and keep a note. Second item that we want to talk about, Meta. They're not done. They took a whole bunch of AI people from OpenAI. They took a bunch more from Apple. We didn't even know they had some, but they had them and they took them. And this week, Zuck says, oh, you know what? Sam Altman at OpenAI, he got himself a Johnny Ive for $6.5 billion, the lead Apple designer. I want one too. So he takes Johnny Ive's handpicked successor, Alan Dye, and he makes him his chief of design. Why? Because they've got all these glasses and all these other things coming. We need someone to design all that stuff. So we're going to do this Apple design kind of thing. There's only one Apple on the planet, so they took one. And Apple, luckily, had Stephen LeMay, who's been there since 99. Internally, he's a lot more liked on design than Alan Dye. So internally at Apple, there's a lot of applauding going on. Oh, good riddance. This guy, we couldn't get rid of him. He was on the WWDC. I mean, he was on the fall introduction of the Apple iPhone Air and all of that. So he's gone. And voluntarily, they didn't have to push him. They did have to push JG off, who they had gotten from Google, who headed up Apple's AI efforts, and he's gone, and they replaced him with another fellow from Google and Microsoft background in AI, Subramania, who's going to hopefully do a lot more interesting things on the AI side. Again, I'm on record. Apple's just getting started on AI, and they're going to just do a lot of interesting things. But this drama of Meta and Apple and so on is continuing. So that's item number 2. 3, Amazon, AWS, which been around for 20 years, changed the way We do compute on the internet. The largest cloud service on the planet. Number 2, Microsoft Azure. Number 3, Google Cloud. Number 4, Oracle, wannabe. With a little bit of OpenAI's help, huge amount of debt, whole separate chunk of issues. But Amazon now finally ready for the big time. 3 years into this ChatGPT thing, they've got the full suite, broad, deep on all of this stuff, and they're coming on strong. And I wanted to highlight that set of keynotes and so on. Little geeky, but Neil, you're just starting your business career, 24 years old. 20 years ago, if AWS hadn't done selling spare capacity to the internet, the world would be a very different place in terms of how the internet works, how AI works, etc. And Amazon doing this at scale is very interesting. In particular, in the show notes, I would highlight a keynote speech by Amazon's CTO, Chief Technology Officer, Werner Vogels. He's from the Netherlands. Amazing fellow. Most people don't know him. He's behind the scenes. Literally rethought how software should work. You as a software person would love this. If you haven't seen it, anyone out there, whether you're a software person, tech person, or Amazon user, please watch some of this because this man is a fountain of wisdom. He develops this concept called the Renaissance developer. He said, be deep on your expertise, but be wide, be a polymath like Leonardo da Vinci. Just an inspiring presentation for an hour. And you don't have to watch the whole thing, but it's just great stuff. So Amazon in the news, I think Amazon and Google have been the underdogs for AI for the last couple of years. I highlighted both of them a couple of years ago saying, they'll probably come out ahead. And this year, at the end of 2025, I feel vindicated because they're both coming on strong. They're both really coming on with their A game. And we're just starting this AI thing in a big way. Lots of stuff here. I'm sorry I've just dumped it all, but I wanted to frame it in terms of some of the things that hit me. Neil, what do you think of all of these things?
Yeah, just quickly touching on the ChatGPT stuff. It's not surprising that they're on code red, just given everything that's been happening recently. And the AWS stuff, I think you hit it right on the nose. After I started to work a bit more and get kind of hands on with this stuff, just in terms of how it's being used in businesses and different sectors, it's undeniable how much impact it's had. But I wanted to talk about is the whole Apple situation with Alan Dye. I think it's interesting. I think it's similar to what you said. I think most of the sentiment I saw online was more of a good riddance than we lost a good one. Just because it's interesting to see how this reaction would have been a year ago, maybe before Liquid Glass came out, because he was the main person behind this. And in my opinion, Apple's completely botched the Liquid Glass rollout and the way that they've implemented it. Just from like a UI UX like consistency perspective, there's so much inconsistency with this stuff across Apple's UI. And it was funny because there was actually this tweet right before we started to roll where Justin Bieber, of all people, was on Twitter complaining about how Apple's UI is like gone down the drain, because he'll be trying to send a text to someone while he's listening to music. And like a lot of us, he'll accidentally hit the dictation button on his keyboard, and the music, everything will stop and the dictation will turn on. And then he'll have to go manually and turn his music back on. He literally said if Apple doesn't fix this, and he was joking obviously, but he's like, I'm going to have to go to Apple and put everyone in a chokehold because this needs to be fixed. And it's small stuff like that it's funny that people like Justin Bieber, who by nature probably doesn't know as much about UI, UX, and product design, is even finding issues with this and speaking out about it. Just shows that Apple, under some of the newer regiment versus some of the older regiment, has maybe lost a bit of touch and feel as to some of the core features that maybe Steve would not have let slide. So that all goes to say that I'm sure Alan Dye is going to do a great job at Meta. He was behind a lot of really good stuff at Apple too, but it's an interesting time for Apple right now. I think everyone's freaking out, probably a bit more prematurely, because you'll see the headlines that all these people are leaving Apple, and people are like, is Apple I saw a tweet where it was like, is Apple the next BlackBerry? Like, no, they're not the next BlackBerry. I think there's way too much at stake here, and they know what they're doing, but
Not only is there way too much at stake, there's way too much fun to be had with these new technologies. And Apple, as we're going to talk about in our main section, they have the most amazing portfolio of things that they are going to see fundamentally be enhanced and leveraged because of all of this stuff. And I couldn't be more excited on the outside. So I can only imagine Tim Cook and his people, whoever's left or whoever's coming in, being more excited than ever. This is not an oh my gosh thing. And Apple already is one of the largest companies in the world. they are the world's largest, most interesting startup, as far as I'm concerned, in terms of AI. The other thing I love your Justin Bieber example about the music overwhelming, etc. I want to put a pin on that. It's one of my reads of the week. I'm going to come back to that. I don't want to spoil it right now, but this business of design, it's not just these two or three, four companies that have a lock on design. Design is happening globally, and that's the kind of hint I'm going to give you and give everybody. And it's coming from places like China, and they're not celebrated yet in terms of individuals and people like we put them on a pedestal, Johnny Ive and so on. This design thing, design touches can come from anywhere, and they will, and they're going to startle us, and they're going to make us feel amazing. We've just begun this AI thing. AI is just a mirror, as I've said, to our lives, and it just allows us to do what we like to do so much better, faster, more efficiently, etc. And we've just barely figured out how to use this stuff in a real way. So for all of those reasons, I'm very, very excited. And I wanted to just highlight, I mean, it's just nuts that, the second week of December, when things are supposed to be winding down, this stuff is ramping up. And we haven't even talked about one of the things that's, again, spoiler alert, is one of your key items for later in the show. In Netflix are buying, Warner. It'll take a year to close and all that. That's a huge, big ass deal, and lots of changes in terms of how we live our lives and so on. Anyway, so oh my God, I can't think straight. So it's just so much stuff going on. Let's get to our main topic of this show. And this week we're doing it a little differently. The Verge had a very interesting episode with Vergecast with David Pierce and company. They had their Allison who reviews their phones, and Victoria Song, who does all of their wearable stuff. The three of them basically took the 9 categories of Apple products on the Apple website. The Mac, the iPhone, the AirPods, pads, etc., all the way down to the Vision Pro that you can buy on Apple's site. So you can spend, $10,000, $20,000 buying any one of those things, or combinations in each category, and really have an amazing, enhanced, technology leveraged life. And they took all those 9 products and they ranked them in terms of their affiliation with those and interest in those products, etc. And this, as you can imagine, has created a lot of kerfuffles over across the internet. People are reacting to it, etc. We'll put links to all of this on the show. Just a spoiler alert, in terms of how they broke it out, they had some variation in terms of number 1, 2, 3 in each category. But if you break it up a third, their rankings, and we're going to talk about our rankings. Their rankings were the top 3 in no particular order. There is an order, but everyone has their own. But the Mac was number 1, the iPhone number 2, AirPod was number 3, and then they had the middle third. They had the Apple AirTags, and the number 5, roughly, was the Apple Watch, which has become the biggest digital watch on the planet. Billions of dollars. This by itself would be a whole big tech company by itself. It was spun off. And the iPad, which surprisingly was much lower, number 6, number 5. And there was a lot of debate about this, and we'll have fun talking about this because I know your inclinations on this. So iPad was number 6. And then the bottom third, in again, no particular order, but Apple TV, the HomePod, which are their speakers, and of course the Vision Pro, the $3,500 infamous failure from Apple, that it was number 9. And so this was the ranking. They have a lot of fun talking about it. I would encourage all to watch the episode. It is fun. It'll get your dander up in places and so on. But we're talking about for a couple of reasons. Number one, these products collectively are the fundamental way we are going to interact with AI, not just from Apple, but from everybody else, versions of this stuff. And as a result, it's very timely to talk about this at a general level, not just the way they're talking about it in terms of these Apple products, which one do you like and which one you don't like, but a broader. So that's one of the reasons I want to talk about it. And then the second is that these things are also going to evolve dramatically because of AI. And I wanted to talk a little bit about that as well on this. So that was the context. So I wanted to suggest all this, put it out there. Please watch the thing, or at least look at the summaries. We'll put the links up in the show notes. But Neil, I am dying to hear, what do you thinking about these
Yeah,
rankings?
I don't know. Let me run through this and see what mine would be. I think their top 3, I would keep the same 3: Mac, iPhone, AirPod, but I'd maybe switch up the order. I think I'd do iPhone first, Max second, AirPod third. I think the AirPods are probably the best thing Apple's put out in the last, like, let's say five. I don't know how long ago they came out, to be honest, but like 5, 10 years maybe in total. Middle three: AirTag, Apple Watch, iPad. This is probably where I'd start to switch things around a bit. I would probably do Apple Watch, Apple TV, AirTag, and then bump iPad down to the third row, and then have the third row the iPad, HomePod, Vision Pro. The HomePod's terrible. I think they've done a really poor job with that. I have one that I took off of your hands a couple of years ago, and I just use it to play music every now and then. And even trying to stop the music that's playing is like one of the hardest tasks that I've had to do when it comes to interacting with a speaker. It doesn't listen to voice commands. Even the touch capacitive thing on the top doesn't work half the time. Vision Pro, I really haven't gotten to try out much. But the Apple TV I do use every day. I think the Apple TV is a really well designed thing. I just think that Apple has so much other stuff that's maybe a bit more impactful that I still have to keep it in the second tier. The iPad is probably the one that you were alluding to a second ago. I don't know. The iPad's mixed for me. I only use the iPad to consume video, so the movies, YouTube, TV shows, and I think that alone doesn't justify it being in like a higher ranking in my head. Because when I need to do any actual work, any serious work, I'm using a Mac. I'm not using an iPad. And this answer might have changed when I was still in college. I would use the iPad a lot to take notes. So for that aspect, I think it's really interesting. But yeah, I think we were talking about this a second ago before we rolled. I obviously understand where they got these products from. These are just the main ones at Apple, like the flagship products. But I think if you expand it a bit, some things that I would like to toss in would be iMessage, because that's a product in my eyes.
Software. You're talking about software.
Yeah, exactly. So if we were to mix the hardware and software piece, because Steve Jobs said the hardware is nothing without the software, and vice versa, I think iMessage would be up there for me. And then Apple Silicon would also be up there for me, because I think that's something that a lot of people don't think about. But looking back at a few years ago when they made that announcement to now, I think it's come really far away, and they've blown everyone away in the competition area. But yeah, I think it's a pretty good list overall.
I think, look, I love the fact that you honed in on Apple Silicon, but Apple Silicon is not what your mom is going to think about. My mother-in-law is going to think about. This is not what normies, mainstream think about. Yet it is the fundamental driver of almost every one of these 9 items in terms of the chips that make it work. The hardware, software at the deep technical level, because you're a computer scientist, master's computer science from UT Austin, you know this stuff. Apple Silicon is extraordinarily unique. It gave Apple a 5-year advantage on everything from Macs to iPads, where day-long battery life. It took Microsoft, Qualcomm, everybody almost 5 years to get to the point where, just on the hardware side, to catch up with day-long battery life. And yet, on the Apple world, we've been living in it's great. These things have Apple Silicon related chips. The AirPods. It's the underlying building material. It's the thing that's most underappreciated and very, very important. And I love the fact that you brought in the applications, because Apple doesn't sell the applications for the most part. It's just they're iMessage work across all of their systems. These things will read you the message on CarPlay. We didn't even mention CarPlay. CarPlay, Apple messages will read every, surveys show half the people won't even buy a car if it doesn't have CarPlay, which is why Mary Barra, the CEO of GM, change your decision. Put CarPlay back into General Motors cars. That is one of the biggest mistakes you're making long term, okay? And you, as an auto company, are not going to be a software company. Just end of story, okay? I may eat my words in 5 years, but I'm going to lay it out there right now. Software is hard. Yes, Apple, ebbs and flows on the quality of its software, but there's no question their software, iMessage, you mentioned iMessage, which is consistent across all of those platforms, iPad, iPhone, Mac, etc. It works across all of that seamlessly. I really couldn't care which device I pick up. I'm going to get my iMessages. Same thing with my other core Apple app, Apple Notes. No one talks about it. Apple Notes. All of my thoughts, everything I think about in life is in my Apple Notes. It goes across all of these platforms. It works. Apple doesn't sell it as a product, but if I'm in the Apple ecosystem, it's part of it. And then if I trust myself, and by the way, I trust these apps over anything I do on Android. I have 18 Android devices sitting there from Samsung, every one of them, thousands of dollars. I spend a lot more on non-Apple devices over there than on Apple devices. None of the apps are worth anything, the consistency of this. So I love the fact that you put your finger on 2 things that were not on the list of 9, because Apple doesn't sell them on the website. That's why the Vergecast didn't pick them. But they're key part of why they make all of the 9 products at various stages, including, I would argue, the Vision Pro. The notion that I can have a virtual screens of my laptop that are huge and wide, amazing. It's not a mainstream product. I got it. It was a demonstration product. In $3,500, early adopters with disposable income like me could spend the money, but it's not a mainstream product. But it was a signal that in 3, 4, 5 years, when the hardware costs come down, this is going to be a mainstream thing. It's the same thing Meta's doing with their smart glasses at every category with the displays and all of this other stuff. Their top of the line Orion stuff is those things. If they were a product today, would be $20,000. Why? Because the screens are literally industrial diamonds. They can't productize it, even with an Alan Dye, the chief design guy from Apple, sitting at Meta now. It's just hardware takes a long time. So I love the fact that you brought up silicon and the applications. They're what make Apple apps great. And yes, we can argue all day long about which is where it ought to be. I, in particular, will take issue with the iPad at number 5, number 6, etc. Why? Because the constant debate, and we've talked about this in an earlier show, is every early adopter wants iPad to be a Mac. They just want, and no one really accept that these are 2 separate fundamental use case devices. And Victoria Song, who's a Gen Z like you, also put it down at 5 or 6. Why? Because again, you guys grew up with technology. You will have your own uses for your iPhone, and you will have your own uses for your Mac, right? But the iPad is a fundamental different device. She says, oh, it's only for the kids who love it, 6 or 7 who just want to watch all their content on their state, and seniors. My parents, your grandparents who passed away, your granddad passed away this year. They love their iPads. And guess what? Never in a million years were they were ever going to use a Mac or a MacBook or a laptop. We got all those things for them. Remember your nanny, my mom, your grandma, we got her an desktop 10 years ago. She loved it because all she had to do is tap it, etc. It was the closest thing to an iPad before there was an iPad, and that was the genius of the iPad. So in many ways, iPad, if I look at it across mainstream people, 8 billion, I might even put it number one, because it redefined computing, the thing that got Bill Gates and Steve Jobs to become who they were in the early 90s. That was the real motorcycle of the mind. The bicycle of the mind was the computer, the Mac, or the PC. iPhone, you could say, was the motorized bicycle, but the bloody iPad was the motorcycle. It was the normal computing device for everybody. And that's what's being underappreciated when we look at it in terms of specific use cases. What do I do, etc. And the amazing thing about Apple today with this portfolio, you could spend less than $1,500 and you can get one of almost every one of the core products. You can get a basic iPad, a Mac Mini, or a MacBook Air, and get a basic Apple Watch and AirPods, and you're in business. You have the best of the best across all competing products from any other company. And that's the other thing I just want to talk about, the reason I put this as a main topic to discuss. Because these discussions at Verge, they're just talking about Apple versus Apple. We're so jaded with Apple as people, is that we just debate and, the software's never changed, or this is not changed, liquid glass, blah, blah, blah. I don't like this, I don't like that. Oh my God, guys. Have you ever tried? I just bought a Windows laptop, the top of the thing. It took 2 hours for the damn thing to start up and upload everything, the bloatware. If you compare each one of these 9 categories to their competing products, whether it's from Google or Microsoft, etc., hands down, especially when you throw in chips, power, efficiency, etc., when you throw in the application, consistency across the platforms, it's no contest. Apple is Apple, and they don't get the credit for it because we just debate Apple within Apple. And that's the real point I wanted to highlight. Every one of their 9 products are the best in their categories on the planet. Vision Pro, you could, even that one at the bottom at number 9, nothing compares to it. Maybe the XR from Samsung, but guess what? That's only because the Google software on the XR is pretty good. You have a YouTube app, which the Vision Pro doesn't have for competitive reasons from Google. But other than that, there's no reason to get the XR, which is their $2,000 device. The Vision Pro, it still does the Mac screen on any one of my MacBooks, from the Air onto the Pros, this big screen. And when I want to use it on a travel thing, oh my God, there's nothing that compares to it. Even today, that thing, HomePods you talked about, I'm going to defend the products that were at the bottom. HomePods, yeah, you can say this user interface, capacitive screens, that's all Siri. That's going to get fixed next year. So I'm patient. But the bloody speakers are amazing. Okay, I compared them to a Sonos. I have every one of the Google things. It's not even a comparison against Alexas and all these other things from a quality of the speakers and the look and feel and how it makes me look, how it makes me feel. The warmth I get when I'm playing with the HomePod, it's great. Same thing with all of the other products. Apple TV, yeah, there was a very funny bit in the Vergecast episode where Victoria, but she's arguing for the software that comes with the TV is good enough. She's totally right. But Apple TV, every time you use it and you compare it to a Roku or you compare it to your Google TV or Samsung, it's amazing and everything. Some people like the remote, don't like the remote. You can get into the nits on this, but I just wanted to highlight that Apple, particularly because of the two things you mentioned, their chip expertise, which is their hardware core thing, and their application things, is hands down the best thing. And you have to look at it beyond Apple compared to the rest of the world. And the last point I'll make is everything we're talking about AI, ChatGPT, etc. Just imagine, barely imagine all the things you're going to be able to do with AI on every one of these platforms in the next 2 or 3 years as the technologies actually get useful, hallucinate less, safer, not go off the rails, all that stuff, and it's actually built in multiple, smaller AIs and so on. Oh my God, I can't wait. It's so exciting. That's why I think this is an interesting main topic, and thank you for jumping in. But you please respond to any of the things I said. But I just wanted to make the point: Apple is literally unique relative to in terms of these 9 buckets against everything else out there, and I own everything else, so that's why I have that strong feeling about it.
Yeah, I mean, I think everything you're saying is very true, and it also highlights how maybe how much we take for granted. I think it's more or less a testament to how Apple's normalized this stuff and how we've moved past it being oh, they did the iPad. I don't think people care as much about that. We've accepted that they've done it and they've done well, but I think they've created a good problem for themselves where they've set the bar so high that when you're trying to use something, it doesn't feel like it's perfect. I think Apple's demanded perfection. And I think when that's not met, that's what causes a lot of these reactions. But no, I definitely agree with you that in the end of the day, this is a null and void conversation because of the fact that they've blown everyone else out of the water. It's just that now they're competing with themselves, I think,
We're
is the thing.
taking it for granted, just like we take our parents for granted, like I did. Just like we sometimes take our spouses for granted, our best friends for granted. They're our best everything for a reason. Yeah, either by birth or choice, they're best friends, our best family members, etc. And they've got lots of negatives and positives, but we take them sometimes for granted and we say, oh, if only my wife did this and not that, if only my friend did this and not that, if only my dad did this and not that. These are quibbles. Appreciate the broader picture that if you have a good relationship with them, don't take them for granted. Don't take the Apple stuff for granted, because guess what, other than your bed, these are the core products that we basically spend more time with than any other individual in our lives. Okay, for better or for worse. And if you're picking any of the other hardware platforms, yeah, you're doing all that stuff, but those are ad hoc. They don't work all together because they don't. And they're different. Don't take it for granted. We take it for granted. So I just wanted to get it off my chest. So thank you for letting me do that. And if you guys have any thoughts, actions to this, bring it on. I love it. And we'll continue this. I enjoyed it. I hope
No, it was great.
everyone got something out of this. Okay. It gets us to our watch and reads of the week. Neil
Yeah.
Makwana, what do you think? You have a good one.
Yeah.
I love good one.
Yeah, my read of the week is kind of once again hammering on a topic that I brought up a couple of times, but it's about how AI is being integrated in education. It's a New York Times piece from a professor who's explaining that AI has maybe not changed their classroom for the worse, as most people would assume, but it's added in ways for them to change and adjust their teaching style. This is from a professor who does more things on the literary side of things, so not an engineering professor, anything more writing and stuff. And they've explained how they've readjusted their policies in their classroom and how they go about setting deadlines and expectations for assignments, but also talks more about the culture within the classrooms and how a lot of people, a lot of students in particular, are looking down on other students who are using AI to kind of do all their work. They use this good analogy saying that if you go to work out, the machines can't do the reps for you. You have to do the reps. It's just if you have a better machine, you might get a better workout in if it's newer, if it's, has the proper tension and stuff like that. And I think that's a good analogy to show how this AI stuff is being used, and it has to do with that whole bicycle for the mind concept that I feel like we bring up a lot. But it's a good piece that gives a good view into what boots on the ground. Since I've graduated, I'm not really in it as much anymore. It explains kind of where the environment's at because it is changing so fast. So I definitely give it a thumbs up, and if anyone's interested in that, I think it's a great read.
Also, second this article, everyone, please read this. I love two things about it, especially. Number one, the professor is being proactive. This is not a defense, please, glass half full approach to this, which is awesome. Number two, from both perspectives, student and teacher, these are tools. This is one of the core points I got from the Werner Vogel's CTO of Amazon AWS keynote, which I'm encouraging everyone to watch this weekend, some part of it. Because he makes the point, especially at this time when the hottest use of AI is for coding. And he basically reminds the millions of developers that use Amazon and other products, these things are tools. You, the developer, own the tools. You own the ultimate results of the product. Same thing goes to when we're looking at AI in education or in healthcare or legal or anything. If you're using AI, you're using it as a tool, as a student or a teacher. Don't expect it to basically, it can do the work for you, cheat, whatever. But ultimately, if you really want to be better as a person through your life, figure out how to make yourself better through the tools. The tools make you stronger. So if you think about this as tools, the whole frame changes, and it applies to education as well. And I love this piece because the teacher talks about it as tool and how he or she can leverage it. And as a result, I love the piece. So thank you for bringing up as a read of the week. I cheated. I wanted to bring up two reads of the week. One is a watch. One is MKBHD, who's one of the world's top tech reviewers. He reviews autos, and he has a separate channel on autos, but he actually did a 15-minute video reviewing a car that most of us, unfortunately, in the United States cannot access or buy. It's a Xiaomi SU7, which is a four-door sedan. It looks like a Porsche four-door sedan, or it looks like a Tesla, etc. Just watch this video. Whenever you're seeing this US versus China business and how Chinese copy everything from us, in this 15 minutes, he just shows you brilliantly this product, which does so many things, hardware and software, what we've been talking about, better than anything we can get in the United States, whether it's from Tesla or any other company, including self-driving, which is a big thing. In China, where this software works, it's supposed to be really amazing in terms of the quality of it. So the SU7, and because it's from Xiaomi, which made its chops on smartphones, they actually have the SU7 Basic, there's the SU7 Max and the Ultra. They name it like phones and so on. But the core thing is the Max, which he reviewed here. The price was $42,000. I'm like, please take my $42,000. Where can I get one? Because anything like this, and he says it here in the United States, whether you buy it from Tesla or GM or Kia or whatever, minimum price tag is $70,000-$80,000, closer to $100,000 with all the bells and whistles. This thing goes from 0 to 60 in less than 3 seconds. It's got amazing personality. And the one software feature he mentions, Neil, is your Justin Bieber thing. He literally talks about a feature where, because this is a software, computer, mobile phone company, they literally set it up so that when the audio system is playing the music in the car and you've got 2 or 3 people and it's giving you directions for take this left turn or right turn, they adjusted the software because they control the entire stack. They built the car. So there are speakers in the headphones in the driver's seat. All of a sudden, the take this next left just shows up in the speakers for the driver. For everybody else, the music continues. In regular cars, whenever you're playing a song, when the directions come on, it just lowers the music for everybody and says, take this left, take this right. And now you've stepped out of the music. That little thing, that is called design. That is called attention to detail. That's called user interface, passive user interface. That's the magic. That's what we would say, oh my God, that's Johnny Ive or Johnny Ive's successor. Pay him $5 billion. Zuck can get another one. Just let, But guess what? This came up out of China. This is the place that's supposed to be our enemy. They're going to do this to us and do that to us. No, global market. These people are entrepreneurs. They are extraordinary entrepreneurs. They're innovating, and they're doing it from the bottom up. And this is in a car. And as MKB says, there's nothing technology wise in this car that no U.S. company or European company cannot make. It's just that they thought about it, they put it together, and because of their amazing manufacturing ecosystem, they can make them cheaper than we can, just because they have the manufacturing capabilities. And that's the world we're in. Without China, we're not going to have all the cool things. And right now, because of our geopolitics, we're not going to be able to buy an SUV unless you're MKBHD and you can have it imported and you got a one-off one to review. And so watch this, because you're not going to be able to get it for the next 2 or 3 years under the current politics, whether it's Republican or Democrat, doesn't matter. We're just anti-China right now, which in hindsight, we're going to look back and say that was one of the most stupid things we did to ourselves. And that's, I'm going to say that for the record right now. And this is just a car, but it's just a cool picture of where we are in technology, where we can't have the good things that the world is capable of. And this is competition. And this little video shows you why. Just one. There's tons of these on the internet, by the way. And I just picked this one because MKB does a good job balancing out, etc. So my one watch of the week. My second read of the week in this list today is a good piece, a very thoughtful piece, basically on why language models, why LLM AIs, we're still down the wrong road. And it's a very thoughtful, detailed piece with people with technical chops in AI that say the way we do large language models analyzing language is not the way intelligence actually works in people, not whether it's English or any other language or creatures, animals. Intelligence is a different thing. We haven't cracked the nut on it, and our current approaches don't work it, which is why when the former chief meta scientist of Meta, Jan LeCun, says this is not the way, he's going to create a startup to do world models and so on. That's why they're doing it. Why Ilya Sutskever, the co-founder of OpenAI, is saying, hey, we need to go back to research. We can't just scale the current approach to language models. And Karpathy, who was the first designer for self-driving cars for Tesla. We talked about it a lot in a previous show, and we had posts on this. We'll have in the show notes. Said, "Hey, LLMs don't work. We have to go back to the basics." And this piece gives you a clue, because our entire models are based on interpreting language, and language is just the beginning of the path. And so this is a great mainstream read for people if you really want to get a picture why the current way is not the way, and we are going to have to, this stuff is going to take longer. So that's my second read of the week, which takes us to our obsessions of the week. And again, Neil, you have a good one teed up here. Go ahead.
Yeah, it's I'm sure everyone's seen and talked about it and heard about it, but it's the whole Netflix Warner Brothers situation. It was rumored for a while that obviously this was going to happen. Netflix maybe wasn't one of the top players. People were thinking maybe Paramount, just because of various political reasons. But Netflix, due to the amount of liquidity they have, was able to put in a pretty irresistible deal on the table. And Warner Brothers has entered exclusive talks. And now the most recent reporting is that it's done. There's people saying that Paramount might try and do like a hostile deal also, but bottom line, Netflix is going to absorb Warner Brothers. Now, it's important to specify that it's not the Discovery piece. So not CNN, not Discovery Channel, not all that stuff, but they're going to be taking over HBO Max, Warner and all of its properties. So DC, Harry Potter, all those things that people go to these parks for. I think it's a big deal for various reasons, but the biggest reason for me that I wanted to bring up is the whole movie theater elephant in the room. It's very, very clear that Ted Sarandos, the guy who runs Netflix, has said repeatedly that he believes fully in streaming. Obviously, why would he not? Netflix is a streaming company, and he's had several moments where he said things that have maybe angered people who like watching movies in theaters. There's one quote I remember for 2024. He mentioned his son, who is an editor. He said that his son watched Lawrence of Arabia for the first time on his iPhone. And that's one of the worst things I think I've ever heard ever, because we watched
We did.
Lawrence of Arabia recently. I got to watch it for the first time. We watched it in the movie theater because, there's certain movies that, regardless of what your stance is on this, I think it's bottom line fundamentally better to watch these things on a big screen like they were intended to be seen. And I think seeing it on an iPhone maybe degrades the quality of that. So it's more of a conversation to be had about what do movie theaters mean in 2025. I think there's been a bit of a resurgence compared to obviously coming out of the pandemic for various reasons. We couldn't go to the movies, but if Netflix does do this, which they are going to do, it seems, what does that mean for the future of theaters? There were some rumors early on that Netflix was potentially creating their own movie theater like experiences where they would integrate these interactive experiences with properties like Squid Games and stuff within these movie theaters where people could go and watch movies but also interact with a lot of their properties similar to what you would do at a theme park. Whether that's going to happen or not, we'll see. But I think the biggest thing to underline is Warner Brothers works with some of the biggest directors in the world, one of them being Christopher Nolan, who is
Your
very
favorite?
adamant on shooting his movies in IMAX large format. And if that content ends up becoming a Netflix exclusive and going straight to streaming, or it's only shown a limited theatrical release and then goes to streaming, I think that really does disrupt a lot of the industry as it stands. And I think it's going to be, as you mentioned, this is going to take a while to wrap up. These deals don't happen overnight, but I think it's more or less a conversation of where we at in the landscape of streaming versus physical media and movie theaters.
I think it's well said, and obviously very important. 70 billion. It's going to take at least a year to go through the regulatory process. There'll be a lot of politics because the Trump administration is going to sign off, so they're going to want their piece of flesh on some of the stuff, and so there'll be lots of stuff, drama around that. But I think the broader points you're making are key ones, right? One is the dimension of venues, theaters versus TV, etc. And one thing Netflix Surroundos has literally done very well is not gotten religious about it. This was, if you just look last few years, there's been tons of Netflix movies that have been released in theaters, released in lots of windows, etc., for all sorts of reasons. One is obviously to attract the talent, like the Christopher Nolans of the world, who do want the theatrical piece. To me, this is not an either or. Life is not binary. It's all of those two things. And I agree with you. Lawrence of Arabia, watch it on a big screen if you can, not on the thing. But guess what? Lots of people around the planet don't have the opportunity to go watch it in a theater. In that case, I'd rather that person watch it on an iPhone or even an Apple Watch or any kind of watch. I know it's not the best thing, but better something than nothing. It's the aperture. And Netflix has widened their aperture. And that's the interesting thing. One is this venue business. The second thing I'll bring out is that Netflix is one end of the video barbell in terms of the technology world. The other one is, of course, YouTube, which is the other mega gorilla. And both of them are important because they serve billions of people watching video, long form over here on the Netflix and long and short form on the YouTube. And obviously they got TikTok over here as company and Meta Reels and all the short stuff. Besides the physical, whether you watch it in a theater or on your screen dimension, there's another dimension, which is long and short. And right now, YouTube is long and short, and Netflix is long only. But I would argue that much of Netflix's strategy over the last 5 years has dramatically changed because of the influence of short, TikTok, Suits, and all these other old Hollywood properties, secondary, tertiary shows got popular first again in 30, 60-second clips on TikTok, then led to huge popularity on Netflix and made those people, huge amounts of money and the stars again because of that. Same thing with Friends, same thing with any of the shows that you want because we saw them in short clips. Netflix, they don't play on the short side yet. So they got a lot of things to do, a lot of wood to chop. I love the fact that they did this. Third thing I'll say, again, this is tech innovation. We talk about streaming and this and that, but recognize that, Reed Hastings, who founded Netflix with his partner Mark back in the turn of the century when you were about to be born, his burning issue for doing Netflix it's a famous story. You can look it up. He, back then, if you wanted to watch a movie on your TV, you had to go rent it from Blockbuster, a video. And he got mad one day when there was a $40 charge to return the film, and he got nuts. And he says, in a time when Jeff Bezos 4 or 5 years ago had just started to ship books via Amazon, he said, why can't I just ship CD? And the rest, as they say, is history. And that's, he put 900 movies up on the thing. And for years, you could get the movies through DVD, through Netflix, instead of going to the Blockbuster. And then later on, streaming starts. And now we're at the point, 30 years later, when Netflix now can buy Hollywood studios, hopefully, if this thing closes. And why am I bringing up that story is that never forget the burning issues that tick you off. And if you then have the entrepreneurial zeal, you can change it. It's the same thing we were talking with Justin Bieber, or the thing about the car place taking the music down, because those are very teeny issues, but they're very these burning issues that basically create a catalyst for doing new things with technology. That's why this stuff is always exciting and interesting. AI is just another set of technologies that are going to allow us to fix issues. One of the things I'm looking for AI to help me fix. What the hell do I watch on TV or on the theaters? Too much choice. We've talked about it. It takes me as long as to decide, family, what to watch as watching it. Maybe that burning issue will fix something that'll create a company that 30 years later will buy Netflix. Who knows? So I love your obsession of the week, and I want to lead it to my obsession of the week, which is, it's that time of year. Spotify's Rap of the Year. They invented this a few years ago to tell you exactly what you like in music, and this year they added, your musical age, which I don't like, by the way, because it tells me I'm a lot older than I am, 76. I don't like it. But the cool thing about it is that was an innovation that Spotify did, the Rap of the Year, and people talk about it, and the internet is full of the people's raps of the year. But everyone just copied this. So YouTube has it now, and TikTok. Everybody has their rap of the year, and so this is a whole thing, a social thing. And then the other thing it highlights is that it's also makes a feature out of something that we should be terrified of. Is these services know way too much about all of our personal lives, and they're now turning around and saying, we can tell you this cool stuff that about you that you may not even know about you. So they turned a bug into a feature, which I love, the rap of the year. So that's my obsession of the week. I don't know if that's an obsession you share.
No, it is. It's the whole rap thing. It's pretty crazy how much it's blown up last few years. Spotify Wrapped is obviously the biggest one, but even companies like Wikipedia are doing Wrapped now, so it crosses the whole spectrum. I think I think also from a UI/UX perspective, it's interesting. It'd be funny if there's just a wrapped app that comes out in a few years, or there's in
I love it.
development somewhere where you can conglomerate all these things, because there's so many people who use a variety of services. So I, for example, use Apple Music for some stuff, and then Spotify for other things, and SoundCloud for other stuff, and YouTube Music for other stuff. So it's very fragmented, and it would be cool if there's a way to kind of combine all these things and see your stats in one place. And there are, but one that was maybe done a bit more intentionally or better would be cool. But yeah, no, I think the idea of it and the way it's been implemented over the years has been great, and it's always a fun time of year for this kind of
No,
stuff. So
absolutely. And the other thing is there's wrinkles to be fixed, right? Because Spotify, in many cases in a household, are shared, young kids, etc. So there have been funny raps where, two or three lullabies are the top songs because
yeah,
those people have kids, and the kids just so, love little lullabies. This business of personalization in the world of AI, we're going to have to figure out new technologies so that the systems actually figure out, oh, this is the
of
kid
course,
playing it on the dad's Spotify account. And so give him or her a separate wrap and
yeah,
figure that out smartly without the person having to do it, identify that. These
yeah,
are all innovations that, and hopefully Spotify comes up with these innovations, wraps for your members of your family, as an example. Those are all innovations to come. These are burning issues, what I call burning issues, things that bug you, but you're not going to do anything about them until someone does something about them and creates the next Netflix.
yes.
So anyway, so those are our obsessions of the week, which takes us to our burning questions. And since we just talked about Spotify Rap, my burning question for you, Neil McQuana, what surprised you the most about your Spotify Rap for
Yeah,
2025?
it actually has to do with the thing you just mentioned. I think there's some speaker somewhere in the house that's straggling and still on my account, and not maybe on the family account. So my Spotify rap was decimated this year because I'd have my music, and then the second or third category was bhajan, because my parents were playing something, and I'm not against it, but it definitely messed up my stats for the year. My listening age, which is also a big piece of all this, that Spotify added this year, is they'll basically run the algorithm, they'll give you your age, but as if, it was done through the music you listen to. So that got a bit mangled. But no, that was the biggest surprise this year. Everything else was, business as usual, a lot of music. But yeah.
Spotify, unmangle us, please. All right.
Yes, I
I
know.
made the request. All right. What's
Thanks.
your burning question for me, my dear friend?
Yeah, mine is off of the whole theater discussion we were having. Plain and simple. Are movie theaters still something that in this current day and time find yourself wanting to go to, or have you kind of like eased yourself into what streaming has to offer?
It's a great question. Again, for me, these are different activities, right? As I talked about before. So I'm not religious about it. I'm not binary about it. Generally speaking, as I get older, younger in heart, hopefully, I want convenience more than the big screen, etc. I like movies. I like theaters, etc. I love it when we go together as family and so on to go watch the movies. Lawrence Arabia was a fun experience to do. Obviously, there's nothing like enjoying that with a tub of popcorn. Hopefully, don't eat all of it, etc. So I love the theater experience. It's just that I do like the convenience of watching this on anything and everything, and so I'm not religious about it. But in general, if a movie comes out and it's not in my top five that I really need to see in the theater, I'll typically wait and for it to come on TV because I've got a big ass TV over there. I get to watch from comfort of my schedules and time. I like that. And yeah, the crowds are good. We used to go to the movies because we wanted to enjoy it with other people and laughing together, etc. But in a world of social media where I can get instantaneously and later on reactions of stuff out there, the granularity of opinion I get from people around the world on media that I enjoy through Reddit and everything, it 100,000 times makes up for the joint experience of the theater, which was the only thing available 20, 30 years ago. So now, because I have choice, the abundance we've got from scarcity to abundance of ways to experience movies, I'd relish and revel in the choice, not in the scarcity of just one versus the other. And yes, I will go out of my way to watch a Lawrence Arabia with you in a big screen, as big as possible. Yes, I will watch a Chris Nolan on an IMAX because I know he's, sweats the details. But most of everything else, I'm okay. I'm okay watching Harry Potter on a small screen. Okay. So that's my answer.
Yeah,
Hope
I
that
love that.
helps.
It does. It does help.
All right.
Good stuff.
So that's our episode. We may have gone a little longer, but I hope you enjoyed it. Again, we talked about a lot of fun, controversial issues, maybe controversial issues. As usual, thoughts, comments, feedback, always welcome. As usual, like and a subscribe, always appreciated. It helps the algos, help us do more things. And thank you for joining us. And as always, stay tuned.
Yeah. See you next time. Thanks.